Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of MetrObelisk Radio. Today we are going to be ranking the filmography of Quentin Tarantino. This list will rank his movies from worst to best, and we are only going to be talking about the movies that he has written and directed. So the movies Natural Born Killers and True Romance will not be included on this list. So without further ado, let's get into my personal rankings of Quentin Tarantino's filmography. Number 9. The worst movie in Quentin Tarantino's filmography, in my personal opinion, is Death Proof. There's not too many positive things to say. Unfortunately, I can only focus on the negative. And one of the big negatives is it feels like that this is two movies in one, in the sense that you have like this really gritty, really grimy film print for like the first like half of the movie, and then the second half it cuts to this very clean, very well shot car chase film that just comes out of nowhere. And Stuntman Mike is supposed to be this real big badass character that gets reduced to almost nothing by the end of it. So if I were you as a Quentin Tarantino fan, I would not watch Death Proof. Even if you're watching the Grindhouse double feature, Planet Terror is the far superior movie. Number 8. Jackie Brown. With regard to Jackie Brown, I think this movie is largely forgettable. Like, the only characters I honestly remember are Pam Grier and Robert Forster as the bail bondsman. But I know that the movie leads up to a final heist in the mall. I can't exactly remember what the heist was all about. I remember Bridget Fonda getting shot multiple times in the chest by Bob De Niro by the end because she was pissing him off. But other than that, I think the movie is largely forgettable, and to me, that's a real cardinal sin if you're a filmmaker. Number 7. Kill Bill. Now, yes, I am regarding Kill Bill as one movie because that is the way that Quentin Tarantino originally intended it to be viewed. It was Miramax that forced him to split the movie into two. So all the positives that I have to say about Kill Bill are from the first movie, from the first fight scene with Vivica Fox all the way to the fight scene with Lucy Liu. It was very well built up, very well paced, and you actually gave a damn about the bride. All the negative aspects don't come in until Volume 2, where the movie just slows down to a crawl. And that's largely because Quentin Tarantino put a lot of the backstory in Part 2, and it's a lot of backstory that's not really necessary. The backstory regarding the wedding and what led up to the shooting was fine, but I feel that the bride's training with the master was really unnecessary. And the fights in this movie are really uneventful because the bride does not kill Bud, which is Michael Madsen's character. He gets killed by the Black Mamba that Ellie Driver brings in. Ellie Driver just loses her eye. And then when she finally goes to confront Bill, it was 30 minutes of nothing but dialogue. And then it was, we're going to meet each other on the beach at 6 a.m. and have a fight to the death. Well, plans changed, and it was just block a couple of sword swings and do the 5-step heart stop, whatever that move was called. I think someone in the comments will correct me on that one. I apologize. I can't remember the name of the move that Quentin Tarantino gave that. So all in all, Kill Bill had great momentum in Volume 1 and then really slowed down by Volume 2, and that's why I rank Kill Bill so low on the list. Number 6. Now we're getting into more of the middle section of Quentin Tarantino's filmography, so there's going to be a lot more subjectivity between these three movies. Now keep in mind, I don't think these three movies are necessarily bad. I just think that they're, one is better than the other for just a couple of different reasons. With that out of the way, let's get right into number 6, which is Inglorious Bastards. Inglorious Bastards really has a simple plot. On one side, it follows Shosanna, who owns a movie theater, and she wants to trick the Nazis, the high-ranking Nazi officials, to go and see a movie and barricade the doors and kill them all to end the war. And on the other side, you have the Bastards, which is a special forces unit that is designed to go in undercover into France and who basically want to kill Nazis and scalp them, is pretty much all it is. Now, one of the biggest positives for me with this film is it is heavily inspired by Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream in the sense of a movie within a movie, with Nation's Pride, which is the movie that Shosanna is screening for the high-ranking Nazi officials and is going to kill them during that. I was a theater student back in high school, and so I picked up on a lot of things, hence why this movie is also more of a comedy than it is a drama. Midsummer leaned more toward the side of comedy. It's more of dark comedy, but comedy is comedy no matter which way you slice it, in my opinion. And because this movie is more of a comedy than it is a drama, that's why the plot can get really ridiculous at times. Like when Eli Roth's character, I think it was the Bear Jew, was walking out and basically killing the Nazis with the baseball bat. And hence the whole scalping Nazis, and even the bar scene when they find out Diane Kruger's character, I can't remember her name, but they find out she's a double agent, and they all start aiming their pistols at each other's balls, and that's how they start shooting, and everyone dies except for the Bastards who are waiting. I think either on the top floor or in the basement. I can't remember the exact placement, but that doesn't matter. Another one of the more positive things about this movie is it got the original movie re-released to DVD and Blu-ray, I believe. I know for sure it was released to DVD, but the only thing that the original movie and Quentin Tarantino's movie share is just the name, and that's it. The real negative aspects of this movie is the fact that 70% of this movie is in German, so if you're really not into reading subtitles, I would not recommend that you watch this movie, because I think only 10% of it is actually in English. Other than that, this movie is really well made, especially with Christoph Waltz's Colonel Hans Landa. If you're really into dark comedies, I really recommend it. But if you're looking for this World War II movie to be historically accurate, I would not recommend wasting your time. Number 5. Pulp Fiction. Now, I think with Pulp Fiction, following the 4 characters who are all connected in some way was a good idea, in the sense that it took more of a novel approach than a traditional movie approach. I don't think that the film itself is mediocre. I think it's just its style. I think Quentin Tarantino really perfected it later on, but this movie has quite a few memorable moments, like the Royale with cheese, or the God coming in and saving Vincent Vega and Jules from getting shot to pieces, all the way to the twist contest with Vincent Vega and Mia Wallace ODing on raw cocaine. If you're looking for a fun movie to watch, Pulp Fiction will gladly serve you. Again, I just think that the style was done much better in other movies that he did. Number 4. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This movie follows a couple of characters that are interconnected, same way as Pulp Fiction, from a Manson acolyte to a struggling actor with his stunt double, and even Sharon Tate. One of the best parts about this movie is it is clearly a love letter to classic Hollywood, in the same way like Hail Caesar was a love letter to Hollywood from the 50s under the old studio system. This was a love letter to the 1960s Hollywood, so think like Easy Rider, The Time Machine. One of the common criticisms that you're going to find with this movie is that it's just a movie full of moments and it doesn't really have that much of a plot. My argument to that is that's the way that the movie was intended. Again, this being more of a love letter to Hollywood instead of, just robbing a bank or killing Hitler or finding out who the murderer is. Again, if you like this era of Hollywood, you're going to there's a lot of references that you're going to pick up on and probably respect a lot more than someone who isn't a big fan of this era in time. Now, one of my main criticisms for this movie is it really needed to be two-parted like Kill Bill was. Because the first part of it, where it's just focusing on Rick Dalton, the struggling actor, and Cliff Booth, his stunt double, could have held its own for an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours, basically what that runtime was. And then the Manson family just comes out of nowhere. So what I would have done is have part one, like I said, be just focused on Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth, and then have part two be focused on all the Manson family stuff that was happening in '69. Because the only time that we ever see Charlie Manson in the movie is in the very beginning when he walks up to Sharon Tate's house and says, "Yes, I'm looking for Dennis Wilson." And they inform him that Dennis Wilson has moved and this is the new Tate Polanski residence. And he just says, "Oh, sorry about that," leaves off the back path, which actually did happen in real life. And then the Manson family was almost never brought up until Cliff Booth picks up the Acolyte and drives out to the Spawn Ranch, but that's not until much deeper into the movie. The last thing I really didn't like about this movie is the ending. It has a very Inglorious Bastards style of ending when Tex Watson carries out the murders for the Manson family, and they first stop by Rick Dalton's house instead of Sharon Tate's to kill him, and then Cliff Booth puts up a fight and everyone ends up getting killed. All the way down to like Susan Atkins getting, torched with a flamethrower. The ending really felt out of place, as this really wasn't a comedy like Inglorious Bastards was. So with this being more of a love letter to classic Hollywood 1969, it really felt out of place for me. Number 3. Now we're getting into the top 3 movies in his filmography, and all of these movies I do recommend that you check out, including the middle 3, which was Inglorious Bastards, Pulp Fiction, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think all are good, and I would even throw Kill Bill Volume 1 into the mix, but definitely not Jackie Brown or Death Proof. So without further ado, let's get into number 3 on this list. The movie that fits into the number 3 spot for me would have to be The Hateful Eight, which is a murder mystery set in the Old West during the middle of a blizzard in one haberdashery, and is inspired by Agatha Christie novels, John Carpenter's The Thing, and even his own Reservoir Dogs. Now, what I liked about The Hateful Eight was it actually improved upon the style that he introduced in both Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, where it's an out-of-sequence story. It really works with the murder mystery here. If I had to give one big complaint to this movie, it would have to be that there was no reason to shoot this in 70mm. I feel that was more of a gimmick to just get people in the door. Most of this movie takes place in only one room, so there really was no need to shoot it in ultra-wide 70mm. If it was outdoor in a classic gunslinger story, it would work, but with it being mostly indoor, I think it was just an absolute waste of celluloid. With the negative out of the way, let's get into the positive, which is the characters in the movie. You have about 8 or 9 characters inside the cabin itself. I can't remember the exact amount. You have the bounty hunter with his bounty, a Union soldier, a Confederate soldier, which does get really funny once the storm starts, and a bunch of other people that you don't know if they're telling the truth or if they're just a bunch of fucking liars. And that's how this movie really holds up, because do you trust this one character and not believe the other, or are they all full of shit, or are they all telling the truth? I don't know. No one fully knows. And I think that's why this movie will stand the test of time rather than others in his filmography. Number 2. Django Unchained. Now, what I liked about Django Unchained is it's a Western set in the South, so it opens up in Texas and it moves all the way over into Mississippi. Now, it does start off as a story about slavery, but it evolves into a love story with Django wanting to get his wife back from Monsieur Candy. Christoph Waltz is in this movie as well, but instead of being a colonel for the Nazi party, he's a bounty hunter going by the name of Dr. King when he's riding around in the stagecoach with a tooth hanging overhead. He takes Django under his wing to train him as a bounty hunter. Now, all of the shootouts in this movie are actually really well shot, from the very first one all the way to the final shootout in the Monsieur Candy estate. If I had to give this film one major criticism, is that I feel that it is way too long. I feel like 20 to 30 minutes could have been cut and it would have been far more effective. That's why it's not in my number one spot. Just really because of that. Otherwise, it's a really effective story and really good characters, with the exception of Monsieur Candy. But otherwise, a really enjoyable movie if you're looking for that type of stuff. Number 1. It's Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs is a heist movie where you don't actually see the heist. Now, it is clearly low budget for being his directorial debut, but I think he pulled it off very well with only setting it in one room. And the real meat and potatoes of the movie is, who is the person who tipped off the cops for the heist. This movie has a great cast, from Harvey Keitel being Mr. Black, Michael Madsen being Mr. Blonde, Quentin Tarantino being Mr. Brown, and Steve Buscemi being Mr. Pink. Well, gee, why do I have to be Mr. Pink? Because you got 4 assholes who all want to be Mr. Black, and the problem is they all don't know each other, so they're all going to fight for it. The one main negative that I have about this movie is that it clearly was restricted by its budget. I would have liked to see the opening heist, because then the scene where Mr. Orange is bleeding out in the back of the car would have been a lot more impactful. Them having to wait out in the one room hoping to shake off the cops probably would have meant a lot more. But with this being his directorial debut, they're not exactly going to give the guy, $10-15 million back in 1992. I think this movie was made on a budget of $1 million, $1.5 back then, so things obviously had to be sacrificed. In conclusion, I do believe that Reservoir Dogs is Quentin Tarantino's best movie in his filmography up to this point. His 10th film has not released yet, so this list might get updated sometime in the future. And like I said earlier, I really recommend that you check out all the movies ranked from 1 to 6, including Kill Bill Volume 1, because those are all really good movies in their own right. The only ones I can't really recommend to you are Kill Bill Volume 2, Jackie Brown, and Death Proof. Subscribe to the channel while you're at it, whether that's on YouTube, BitChute, Dailymotion, etc. Make sure to follow MetrObelisk Radio at the social media links in the description. That way you can stay up to date when the newest episodes go up. If you have any topic suggestion for MetrObelisk Radio to cover, then please leave them in the comments. If I use your suggestion for a future episode, I will give you a shout out during that particular episode. With all of that said, have a great day, and I will see you guys next week.